Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're heading back to 16th century Geneva.
Ooh, exciting.
I know, right? And get this, we've got some really cool historical documents about a guy named François Bourdon.
Wow, a deep dive with a real person. I'm already intrigued.
Me too! Get ready for some juicy scandals and a glimpse into what life was really like back then.
Sounds like my kind of history lesson. So what kind of documents are we talking about?
Well, they are excerpts from a 2024 academic PDF.
Okay, a recent analysis.
Yeah, and the PDF focuses on some archival records called consistory records.
Consistory records. From when?
From 1544 to 1560, right in the thick of the Reformation.
Ah, that makes sense. Geneva of the 1500s, that's John Calvin territory.
Exactly. And these consistory records, for those of us who didn't live through it,
Right.
can you explain what those are?
Sure. The consistory was basically like a moral court.
A court, so like judges and laws.
Nope, sort of. It was established by John Calvin himself to oversee the moral conduct of everyone in Geneva.
Everyone, like spying on their neighbors.
Not exactly spying, but keeping tabs on people's behavior and making sure they were following the rules.
The rules. What kind of rules are we talking about?
Well, a lot of it had to do with the new religious and social norms.
So basically enforcing Calvin's vision for Geneva.
Precisely. They dealt with all sorts of things. Marriage, family life, sexual behavior,
La la la.
even things like slander or accusations of witchcraft, you name it.
Wow, so they had a lot of power then.
They did. They could investigate, issue warnings, impose fines, even imprison people.
Okay, so serious stuff.
Yeah, they weren't messing around when it came to upholding the moral code.
It's starting to sound less like a court and more like a morality police.
In a way, you could say that.
And this is where our friend François Bourdon comes in, right?
You got it. François was a wealthy, unmarried Genevan citizen.
A wealthy bachelor. I'm sensing trouble already.
You're on the right track. The sources describe him as a paillard inveteré.
Okay, first of all, what does that even mean?
It's 16th century French for a hardcore womanizer.
Uh-huh. So not just a few harmless flings, then.
Let's just say François had a reputation.
A reputation for trouble, it seems.
You could say that. But here's where it gets interesting. Despite his actions, he held positions of power.
Wait, what? So they knew he was this paillard.
Oh, yes. It wasn't exactly a secret, and yet he still managed to climb the social ladder.
Okay, so maybe money did talk back then, after all.
Wealth and social status definitely carried weight, that's for sure.
It makes you wonder, though, how much could you get away with just by being rich and well-connected?
Those are the questions we're going to explore. It's fascinating to see how power dynamics played out back then.
Absolutely. So how did Francois manage to stay in the good graces of this morality police despite his, shall we say, colorful lifestyle?
That's a great question, and it's where the consistory records get really juicy.
I knew there had to be more to this story.
Oh, there's plenty more. The records detail numerous instances of what they called paillardizes.
Paillardizes? Is that like plural for paillard?
You could say that. Essentially, we're talking about fornication, multiple times, resulting in several illegitimate children.
Hold on, they kept records of all that.
Oh yeah, meticulously.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing the level of detail in these documents.
Wow. So Francois was a busy guy, to say the least.
Others got their least.
You could say that. In 1545, for example, he's accused of having a child with Jean Delajou, who was his servant.
A servant, so already a bit of a power imbalance there.
Exactly. And not only that, the child was baptized Catholic.
Whoa! In the heart of Reformation Geneva. That's a bold move.
Very bold. Almost like a deliberate challenge to the new religious order.
It sounds like Francois wasn't afraid of a little controversy.
That's one way to put it. But this was just the beginning. Fast forward a couple of years to 1547.
Oh boy, here we go again.
Jean Delajou pops up again. This time, she's working as a servant in another prominent household, Henri Aubert's.
And guess what? Francois is accused of fathering another child with her.
You got it. It seems he had a habit of making return appearances before the consistory, so they must have been getting pretty familiar with him by then.
You could say that, but it wasn't just Jean Delajou.
Don't tell me there's more.
There was always more with Francois. That same year, he's also accused of having an affair with a married woman.
Okay, so now we've got servants, married women.
Her name was Robel Reclan, wife of a local butcher named Jean de Gex.
Wow, Francois was playing a dangerous game. What were the consequences for all this back then?
Well, there were consequences, but maybe not as severe as you might expect.
Really? Given what we know about Calvin's Geneva.
I know, right? He was imprisoned and fined, but the sentences were often considered quite lenient.
Lenient for repeated offenses like this.
It does make you wonder if wealth and status had something to do with it.
I'm starting to think that's the key to this whole story.
It's certainly a factor, but to understand it fully, we also need to consider the societal norms of the time, especially when it comes to unmarried men.
So being a bachelor gave you a free pass? Is that what you're saying?
Not a free pass exactly, but there was a different set of expectations, shall we say.
Explain that to me. Why would being unmarried make a difference?
Well, remember, this is the Reformation. Marriage and family were highly valued, but there was also a sense that unmarried men were less accountable for their actions.
Interesting. So it wasn't just about Francois being wealthy. It was also about how society viewed bachelors back then.
Precisely. It's a complex issue, and one that historians still debate today.
It makes you wonder, though, if Francois even cared about any of this. Did he ever show any remorse?
Well, there's this one anecdote from the records that really struck me.
Lay on me.
A witness testified that they heard Francois boasting about fathering 7 illegitimate children before marriage.
7! This guy was a walking scandal. It's like he was daring them to punish him.
It does seem that way. And the fact that he got away with relatively light sentences just adds to the intrigue.
Okay, I'm starting to see why you find this case so fascinating.
It really is a window into a different time and a different set of social values.
And it highlights how power dynamics can shape the course of justice, even centuries ago.
Absolutely. But to really get a sense of how this all played out, we need some more context.
You're right. Were there any cases where people from less privileged backgrounds faced harsher consequences for similar actions?
Oh, absolutely. Take the case of Jean-Philibert Grec.
Who was he?
He was also accused of an illicit affair. But unlike Francois, he received a much harsher punishment. 9 days in prison on bread and water, plus a hefty fine.
Ouch. Talk about a double standard. What made his case so different?
Well, here's where the political landscape comes into play. Goix's stepfather was a leader of a group called the Artichauts.
The Artichauts, what were they? Some kind of secret society?
Not quite. They were a faction that had opposed the Reformation and were ultimately condemned by the Genevan authorities.
Ah, so being associated with them was basically a death sentence for your reputation?
You could say that. It definitely tainted Goix in the eyes of the Consistory, making him an easy target.
So it wasn't just about personal morality, it was also about who you were connected to and where you stood politically.
Exactly. Francois, with his wealth and connections to the established elite, knew how to play the game.
It's frustrating to see how those in power could manipulate the system to their advantage.
It's a tale as old as time, unfortunately.
But that's what makes history so fascinating, right? Uncovering these hidden truths and seeing how they shape the world we live in today.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And with Francois, we've only just scratched the surface.
This is getting good. It sounds like he was more than just a charming rogue. There's a darker, more calculated side to him that we're just starting to uncover.
Oh, you have no idea. Stay tuned, because Francois' story is far from over.
So Francois is basically getting away with everything, thanks to his money and connections.
Well, he was definitely good at navigating the system.
But it seems like he couldn't resist pushing the boundaries even further.
You're right about that. In 1549, we find him caught up in a rather peculiar incident.
Oh no, what did he do this time?
He's accused, along with a man named Jean-François Chapuis, of possessing a book of enchantment.
A book of enchantment. Sounds like something straight out of a Harry Potter novel.
Right. It definitely captures the imagination. But in the context of 16th century Geneva, this was serious business.
Wait, really? Why? Was it like forbidden knowledge or something?
You have to remember the religious climate of the time.
Yeah.
The Reformation had brought about a heightened awareness of spiritual matters.
Sure, but how does a book of enchantment fit into that?
Well, magic was often associated with the devil and seen as a threat to the social and religious order.
Ah, so having a book like that could be seen as dabbling in the occult.
Exactly. And that could land you in some serious trouble, especially with the consistory keeping a close eye on everyone.
So possessing a book of magic wasn't just a harmless hobby, it could actually be dangerous.
Absolutely. It could even lead to accusations of witchcraft, which were taken very seriously back then.
Wow, I hadn't thought about it like that. It really shows how intertwined religion and superstition were in everyday life.
It does. But let's get back to Jean-François Chapuis. Was he just some random accomplice, or is there a connection to Francois?
Knowing Francois, I'm betting there's a connection.
You're right. It turns out that this Jean-François Chapuis was most likely François Chapuis, a physician.
A physician. So
Yeah.
maybe they were using the book for medicinal purposes.
That's a possibility. But here's the kicker. François Chapry was married to François Bourdon's sister.
No way! Family drama alert. So Francois is hanging out with his brother-in-law, messing around with a book of enchantment. What were they thinking?
It's a mystery. The records don't reveal their motives. Were they true believers in magic or just curious? We can only speculate.
I can just imagine the whispers going around Geneva. Have you heard about the Bourdons and their book of spells?
Right. It definitely adds a layer of intrigue to Francois's story. It shows he wasn't afraid to explore the fringes of acceptable behavior.
But something tells me this wasn't the end of Francois's troubles. What happened next?
Well, in 1560, he finds himself in hot water again, and this time it's got political implications.
Uh-oh, I knew those political ambitions would come back to bite him eventually.
The Consistory records show Francois supporting a man named Jean-Baptiste Morly, Seigneur de Villiers.
Okay, and who was this Morley character?
Well, Morley had made some pretty serious accusations against Genevan ministers. He claimed they were involved in a plot against France.
Whoa, conspiracy theories in the 16th century. Some things never change, do they?
Apparently not. But the question is, why was Francois backing Morley? Was he a true believer in these accusations, or was there something more strategic at play?
Good question. What do you think?
But remember, this is a time of political upheaval in Geneva. They just gained independence from Savoy and were establishing themselves as a center of the Reformation.
Right, so things were pretty tense.
Exactly. Alliances were shifting, and the stakes were high. By supporting Morley, Francois was taking a big risk.
He was essentially siding with someone who was accusing the Genevan leadership of treason. That's bold, even for Francois.
It was a gamble that could have backfired spectacularly. And in fact, it did. Morley's accusations turned out to be false.
Oops. So not only was Francois meddling in dangerous political games, he was backing the wrong horse.
You could say that. It makes you wonder if he had a good grasp of the political realities or if he was just blinded by ambition.
It's interesting to see how his personal life and political maneuvering were intertwined.
It definitely adds another dimension to his character. He wasn't just a womanizer. He was a player in the larger political arena of Geneva.
But to understand his motivations, I think we need to go back to his roots. Tell us more about Francois's family.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, Francois came from a very prominent family. His father, Jean Bourdon, was a wealthy merchant and a member of the Council of 200.
The Council of 200, that's like the inner circle of power in Geneva.
Precisely. So Francois grew up surrounded by wealth and influence. It was practically his birthright.
No wonder he had such a sense of entitlement. Do you think his upbringing shaped his behavior?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely a possibility. Growing up in that environment might have given him a sense that he was above the rules.
And what about his brother? What role did he play in Francois's life?
His brother, Julien, was co-seigneur of Compoix with Francois. They acquired this seigneury, basically a feudal lordship, back in 1542.
Okay, so we're not just talking about a wealthy family. We're talking about landowners with real power and authority.
Exactly. And this is crucial for understanding Francois's story. He wasn't just a lone wolf causing trouble. He was part of a powerful network with deep roots in Genevan society.
So the name Bourdon carried a lot of weight.
It did. And that probably gave Francois a sense of protection, even when he was pushing the boundaries.
It makes you wonder how his family felt about his antics. Did they ever try to rein him in?
That's a great question. But unfortunately, the Consistory records don't offer much insight into their feelings or actions.
It's like they're lurking in the shadows, watching as Francois plays his dangerous games.
Right. But their silence is telling in itself. It suggests they either condoned his behavior or were powerless to stop him.
So Francois's story isn't just about individual actions. It's about the power of family and social networks.
Precisely. It shows how these networks can both enable and protect those who belong to them.
It's a fascinating glimpse into the complexities of power and privilege in 16th century Geneva.
And it raises some important questions about how these dynamics still operate today.
It's incredible how we started with a single name in some old documents, and now we're uncovering a whole web of intrigue and social commentary.
That's the beauty of history. There's always more to uncover, more layers to peel back.
I'm hooked. I can't wait to see where Francois's story takes us next. You know, we've talked a lot about Francois, but we haven't really touched on the women in his life.
That's a good point. They kind of fade into the background.
Exactly. But their stories are important too, right? What can you tell us about them?
Well, unfortunately, the records don't give us a ton of detail about their lives.
Yeah, typical historical documents, always focused on the men.
It's true. But we can still glean some insights from what we do have.
Okay, so let's start with Jeanne Delozier. She pops up a couple of times, both as the mother of Francois's child.
Right, first in 1545, then again in 1547.
It makes you wonder about her situation. What was her life like?
Well, we know she was a servant.
Right, which put her in a pretty vulnerable position.
Absolutely.
Fa-
Her livelihood depended on her employers, and that created a power imbalance.
Especially with someone like Francois, who clearly wasn't afraid to use his influence.
Exactly. And remember, this is 16th century Geneva. A woman's reputation was everything.
So a relationship with Francois could have serious consequences for her.
Definitely. Could damage her reputation, make it hard to find work, even lead to social ostracism.
It's sad to think she might have had limited choices in that situation.
It is. And it highlights the constraints women faced back then.
And then there's Robel Recline, the butcher's wife.
Ah, yes. Francois' affair with her adds another layer of complexity.
Adultery was a serious offense, right?
Oh, absolutely. It violated both religious and social norms.
And the punishments, were they the same for men and women?
Unfortunately, not always. Women often bore the brunt of the consequences.
That figures. Double standards are nothing new, I guess.
Sadly, you're right. Their reputations were often tarnished, and that could have serious economic and social repercussions.
It's just not fair. But there's another woman in this story whose experience is even more disturbing. The woman Francois was accused of raping.
Jeannette Domange, yes. That incident happened in Compoix. Remember where Francois was co-seigneur?
Right, right. What a horrible situation to accuse a man like Francois of something like that.
It would have taken immense courage, especially given his power and influence.
I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for her.
It makes you wonder how many other women might have suffered similar experiences but never spoke out.
Or whose stories were never recorded. It's heartbreaking.
It is a reminder that the historical record is often incomplete and biased.
It's our job to try and fill in those gaps, to give voice to the silenced.
Absolutely. To consider the perspectives that might be missing.
It's the only way to get a truly balanced understanding of the past.
And it's why Francois' story is so important. It's not just about him. It's about understanding the society he lived in.
The power dynamics, the social norms, the challenges faced by those who didn't have his privilege.
Exactly. It's a microcosm of 16th century Geneva.
I have to say, this deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
It's amazing how much we can learn from these old documents.
We started with a single name and ended up uncovering a whole world.
A world of scandal, intrigue, and social commentary.
But also a world of ordinary people trying to navigate their lives within a complex system.
It's a reminder that history is made up of real people with real stories.
And that their stories deserve to be told, even the ones that are often silenced.
So, to our listener, we encourage you to keep exploring these hidden corners of history.
Look beyond the surface, consider the untold stories, and challenge the dominant narratives.
Because it's in those forgotten voices that we often find the most valuable truths.
And who knows, maybe you'll even uncover a few scandals along the way.
Well, that's always a bonus.